Winter isn't just cold weather. It's a relentless killer. Each year, extreme winter conditions claim lives through hypothermia, power outages, and accidents. In the U.S. alone, an average of 1,300 deaths annually are directly linked to winter storms and freezing temperatures. As we approach the 2024-2025 winter season, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation has issued a stark warning. Much of the U.S. bulk power system faces an elevated risk of blackouts during extreme winter weather. Imagine being caught in a storm so fierce it knocks out the power grid for days or even weeks. Your heat gone, your food supply limited, your safety compromised. If you think you're prepared because you've got a couple of sweaters and some candles, you're fooling yourself. Winter doesn't care about your optimism or your shortcuts. It's relentless, brutal, and unforgiving. If you don't have what you need when it strikes, you'll be left staring at the frost creeping up your walls, wrapped in a blanket that feels thinner by the minute, wishing you had taken action. Winter isn't going to wait for you to figure it out. It will test you in ways you can't imagine, and the price of unpreparedness is steep. It's your comfort, your health, and potentially your life. In this video, we're diving into 10 critical items, not nice-to-haves but must-haves, that could mean the difference between staying safe and warm, or battling the kind of bitter, bone-chilling cold that doesn't just sap your energy, but threatens your very survival. These aren't luxury items or gimmicks, they're the tools you'll depend on when winter shows its teeth. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you need to outsmart the cold and take on winter like a survival pro. Let's get into it. 1. Insulated food storage and thermal cookers. Winter isn't just cold, it's relentless. When the power grid fails, temperatures plunge, and your cooking fuel starts to run low, you'll wish you had a tool that could preserve your food's heat and allow slow cooking without constant fuel use. Enter the insulated food storage and thermal cooker, an often overlooked survival essential. This isn't just a convenience item, it's a game changer. Picture this. You've managed to heat up a pot of stew or boil some water. Now imagine being able to keep that meal warm for hours or even cook it further using only the heat retained in a vacuum-sealed thermal pot. Winter blackouts can drag on for days or weeks, and each calorie of fuel becomes precious. You can't afford to waste propane, butane, or even scavenged firewood by constantly reheating meals. A high-quality thermal cooker, built like a heavily insulated pressure cooker, lets you heat your food to a boil, seal it, and let the residual heat finish the cooking process while retaining maximum warmth. No extra energy, no waste. And if you think you can just use regular pots or cheap thermoses to achieve this, you're dead wrong. Those lose heat fast, leaving you with lukewarm mush instead of the piping hot sustenance your body desperately needs to combat hypothermia and exhaustion. Insulated food storage isn't just about hot meals either. These tools can keep cold foods cold for longer too, which is vital when your refrigerator becomes a powerless box. It means you can safely store perishables like dairy or even defrosted meat for longer periods, avoiding spoilage and minimizing waste. In survival situations, wasting food is not an option. It's survival suicide. Think of the staples you'll want to save or stretch in the brutal weeks ahead. Rice, beans, oatmeal. Thermal cookers are perfect for these, turning tough grains or legumes into tender, energy-packed meals without burning through precious resources. And here's a grim scenario you might not have thought about. If you're relying on snowmelt or questionable water sources, thermal cooking allows you to both sanitize and cook with that water, reducing the risk of bacterial contamination or waterborne illness. Don't underestimate the psychological impact of warm, hearty meals during a blackout. Cold food doesn't just fail to warm your body, it saps your morale. A thermal cooker, combined with insulated food storage, allows you to serve warm, satisfying meals even when your resources are stretched to the breaking point. Pair this with bulk food staples that are projected to skyrocket in price soon, like rice, pasta, or potatoes. And you're not just surviving, you're weathering the storm with a level of comfort and efficiency that others will envy. Invest in a stainless steel thermal cooker with double-walled insulation. Go for models with at least 5 liters of capacity, because when you're feeding a family during a blackout, small portions won't cut it. And don't skimp. Cheap knockoffs might seem like a deal now, but when their seals fail and your food turns lukewarm, you'll be left cursing your frugality. Stock up while you can. because as inflation and supply chain issues escalate, these life-saving tools will be harder to find and pricier than ever. This winter, your survival might just depend on having the foresight to secure one of these silent, fuel-saving workhorses. 2. Heavy-duty tarps and insulation material. Your house isn't ready for a winter blackout. No matter how cozy it feels with the heat running, when the power fails and the furnace shuts down, those walls and windows will betray you, bleeding warmth into the icy air outside. The bitter cold doesn't just seep in, it assaults your living space, and before you know it, your once comfortable home feels like a refrigerator. That's why heavy-duty tarps and insulation material aren't just good to have during a winter blackout. They're survival essentials. Heavy-duty tarps are more than just oversized plastic sheets. These are the barriers between your family and the bone-chilling draft that creeps in through every crack and crevice. In an emergency, you'll need to seal off rooms, cover broken windows, and block out drafts around doors. Forget those flimsy painter's tarps you can pick up at a dollar store. We're talking about reinforced polyethylene tarps with grommets, rugged enough to withstand outdoor use and thick enough to trap heat when hung as an internal barrier. Use them to cordon off the warmest room in your home, reducing the space you need to heat and keeping precious warmth concentrated where it matters most. And insulation material, it's the unsung hero of winter survival. Layers of mylar blankets, foam boards, or even good old-fashioned rolls of fiberglass insulation can make a world of difference when the temperatures plunge. Line the walls, windows, and doors of your designated living space to trap body heat and prevent the bitter chill from creeping in. Mylar blankets, in particular, reflect up to 90% of body heat and can turn even a drafty room into a semi-livable space. They're lightweight, cheap, and easy to store. There's no excuse not to have them. If you don't insulate effectively, you're going to burn through your heating fuel, or whatever pitiful heat source you have, at a terrifying pace. A propane heater might buy you some time, but without insulation, that heat is flying out the windows and into the void. And tarps aren't just for blocking drafts, they can also be used to build makeshift shelters if your roof collapses or if you're forced to hunker down in an unheated garage or basement. Oh, and don't overlook their utility outdoors. A heavy-duty tarp can protect a woodpile from snow, create a windbreak, or even serve as an emergency sled for hauling supplies through snowdrifts. But be warned, in the coming months as inflation soars and supply chains falter, the cost of durable building materials like these is going to skyrocket. Don't wait until it's too late. Stockpile now, while you can still afford it. And if you think you'll just tough it out without sealing your home, let me tell you what's coming. That frost creeping on your walls, it's going to claim your plumbing next. Without proper insulation, your pipes are freezing, guaranteed. And once that happens, say goodbye to running water and hello to bursting pipes and catastrophic water damage. You think you're cold now? Wait until you're cold and soaked. Don't gamble on staying warm. Heavy-duty tarps and insulation are your frontline defense against the ruthless cold, and without them, winter will make you pay the price. Be ready or be frozen. It's that simple. 3. Manual washing system and non-electric hygiene supplies. Think hygiene is just a minor inconvenience during a winter blackout? Think again. When the power's out, water pipes are frozen, and you're buried under 3 feet of snow. Keeping yourself and your living space clean becomes a life or death matter. Without access to clean clothes, sanitized surfaces, or a way to wash your body, you're inviting sickness into your home. Sickness you cannot afford when hospitals are inaccessible. Ambulances can't get through the snow and pharmacies are shut down. That's why a manual washing system paired with non-electric hygiene supplies isn't just helpful, it's non-negotiable. You might think your stash of baby wipes or dry shampoo will get you through, but after a few days of grime, sweat, and cooking odors in an unventilated home, those shortcuts won't cut it. You need a real system for maintaining hygiene, and you need it now. Start with a portable manual washing machine or even a simple washboard and basin. These tools allow you to keep clothes and linens clean when there's no power for your washer and dryer. Trust me, wearing the same damp, sweat-soaked clothes day after day in freezing temperatures isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Wet clothes rob your body of heat, speeding up hypothermia and increasing your risk of frostbite. And don't even get me started on the stench. In tight quarters, the smell of unwashed clothes and unbathed bodies will make life unbearable, not to mention a breeding ground for bacteria and skin infections. But it doesn't stop at laundry. You'll need a reliable system for personal hygiene. Stock up on non-electric essentials, biodegradable soap, washcloths, and microfiber towels that dry quickly and don't hold odors. A bucket with a lid and a spigot attachment can serve as a makeshift sink for washing hands, faces, and dishes. And here's a pro tip. Invest in a gravity-fed water dispenser for easy access to clean water without lifting heavy jugs. Now let's address the elephant in the room: waste management. In a prolonged blackout, your toilet might become a useless porcelain throne if the pipes freeze or the sewage system backs up. Have a portable toilet or composting system ready to go, along with a stash of heavy-duty trash bags, toilet paper, and hand sanitizer. And don't skimp on these supplies. Run out and you'll find yourself improvising with newspaper or leaves, which is about as grim as it gets. Here's the cold, harsh truth. Poor hygiene during a blackout doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it makes you sick. Contaminated surfaces, unwashed hands, and spoiled food can lead to illnesses like stomach bugs, respiratory infections, or even deadly conditions like sepsis. And when you're trapped in a freezing home with no access to medical care, those minor infections can escalate into life-threatening crises faster than you think. If you're not prepared to stay clean and sanitary for weeks on end, you're setting yourself up for failure. This isn't just about feeling fresh. It's about maintaining your health and sanity in conditions that are already pushing you to the brink. Get your system in place now, stockpile the supplies you need, and learn how to use them. Because when the water stops flowing and the power isn't coming back, the last thing you'll want is to be stuck in a filthy, germ-infested nightmare of your own making. 4. High-calorie shelf-stable foods with long storage life. Let me hit you with some reality. Your pantry is a joke if it isn't stocked with high-calorie, shelf-stable foods specifically chosen for long-term storage during winter blackouts. Forget the fresh produce or frozen dinners you're used to. When the power goes out and grocery store shelves are stripped bare, you'll be left wishing you'd prepared better. Winter doesn't just knock out power. It disrupts supply chains, closes roads, and turns even a routine grocery trip into a dangerous expedition. If your food supply isn't up to the challenge, you're not just risking hunger. You're risking malnutrition, weakness, and a slow spiral into desperation. The average person burns more calories in cold conditions because your body has to work overtime to stay warm. That's not the time to be rationing crackers and peanut butter. You need dense, energy-packed foods that will fuel your body for survival. Think canned meats like chicken, tuna, and Spam, which pack protein and fats you desperately need to maintain body heat. Stock up on nut butters, oils, and high-fat snacks like trail mix or chocolate. Yes, chocolate, because fat is your best friend in a freezing emergency. You need carbs too, plenty of them. Rice, pasta, and oats are staples that are cheap now but won't stay that way as inflation bites harder in the coming months. Keep instant options like ramen or pre-cooked rice pouches on hand because boiling water is often easier than cooking a full meal in blackout conditions. For the love of survival, don't forget canned soups and stews, especially the chunky ones packed with meat and vegetables. These provide both hydration and sustenance in one shot. And don't fool yourself into thinking you can survive on food alone. Winter emergencies last longer than most people think, and that means you'll need a way to supplement essential nutrients. Stock up on vitamins and powdered drink mixes fortified with electrolytes and minerals to prevent deficiencies. Scurvy from lack of vitamin C isn't just a thing of the past. It's what happens when you rely solely on bland, carb-heavy rations without fruits or vegetables. What happens if you don't have this stuff? Let me paint the picture. You're weak, shivering, and unable to function because your body's burning more calories than you're consuming. You think you'll just tough it out, but guess what? Hunger combined with cold leads to impaired decision-making, slower reaction times, and increased risk of injury. You'll make mistakes, dangerous mistakes, because your brain isn't getting the fuel it needs. Invest in airtight containers to keep your staples safe from moisture, rodents, and bugs. Rotate your stockpile regularly to ensure freshness, and don't forget to label everything clearly. This isn't just about having food, it's about having the right food. Calorie-dense, nutrient-rich, and easy to prepare when conditions are anything but normal. 5. Carbon monoxide detector with backup batteries. One of the most overlooked dangers is carbon monoxide poisoning. a silent killer that claims hundreds of lives every winter in the US alone. When the power's out, people turn to makeshift heat sources, propane heaters, kerosene stoves, wood-burning fireplaces. But without proper ventilation, these devices pump out carbon monoxide, an odorless, tasteless gas that can kill you while you sleep. If you think opening a window or cracking a door will keep you safe, think again. Carbon monoxide builds up fast in enclosed spaces, especially when you're desperately trying to keep warm. You need a carbon monoxide detector, and not just any cheap model you grabbed off the clearance rack. You need one that's battery-operated with backup batteries, because if the power's out, your plug-in detector is as useless as a dead flashlight. Don't just stick it in your living room and call it a day. Place detectors in every sleeping area, near any heat source, and in central locations throughout your home. And here's a pro tip. Test the alarm before every winter storm, because a detector with dead batteries is no better than having none at all. Carbon monoxide poisoning doesn't give you a second chance. Symptoms like dizziness, confusion, and nausea can set in quickly, and by the time you realize what's happening, it might be too late to get out. Why is this such a critical prep? Because when the power grid collapses and temperatures drop, the need for alternative heating becomes non-negotiable. Propane heaters and fireplaces might keep you warm, but without adequate precautions, they turn your home into a gas chamber. And don't think for a second that cracking a window will save you. That's a myth. Carbon monoxide doesn't care about your makeshift solutions. It builds up faster than you realize, and the colder it is outside, the more reluctant people are to ventilate their homes properly. What happens if you don't have a detector? Best case, you notice the symptoms and evacuate, assuming you're awake and clear-headed enough to do so. Worst case, you and your family succumb in your sleep, unaware that your life-saving heat source has turned into a death trap. Stock up on long-lasting batteries, and if you can, grab a detector that doubles as a smoke alarm. Fires are another major risk during blackouts, as people rely on candles, portable stoves, and overloaded generators. A combination detector covers both bases and gives you a fighting chance to survive the dual dangers of heat and fire in an emergency. 6. Backup heat source with proper ventilation. When the power goes out in winter, your primary enemy isn't just the dark, it's the cold. The kind of cold that creeps in relentlessly, invading every room, freezing your pipes, and biting at your skin until it feels like fire. If you don't have a backup heat source, you're not just uncomfortable, you're in danger of hypothermia, frostbite, and exhaustion. And before you start thinking, oh, I'll just pile on more blankets, let me stop you right there. That's not a plan, it's a slow surrender to misery. A backup heat source isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. The good news is there are options. The bad news, every single one comes with risks, and if you're not prepared to mitigate them, you might not survive long enough to regret it. Let's talk about propane heaters first. A model designed specifically for indoor use, like the Mr. Heater Buddy series, can keep a small room warm for hours. But don't fool yourself into thinking you can run it without ventilation. Propane combustion produces deadly carbon monoxide, and unless you've also got a working CO detector, as mentioned earlier, you're playing Russian roulette with your family's lives. Then there's the wood-burning stove or fireplace. If you're lucky enough to have one, you'd better make sure it's cleaned, maintained, and stocked with seasoned firewood. Creosote buildup in chimneys leads to fires faster than you can imagine, and trying to burn wet or green wood will fill your home with smoke instead of warmth. Don't even think about scavenging random wood from your backyard without knowing what it is. Some types, like pine, burn hot but deposit creosote, turning your chimney into a ticking time bomb. For those without access to propane or wood, consider kerosene heaters. They're efficient, but the fumes can be overwhelming and deadly without proper ventilation. And no, your portable electric heater won't save you when the power's out, so don't even think about relying on it. Alternative heat sources are becoming scarce and expensive. Inflation, supply chain issues, and rising demand in the winter months mean the cost of propane tanks, kerosene, and even firewood is climbing. Don't wait until the first snowstorm to realize you can't afford to stay warm. Stockpile now. Fuel, heaters, and everything else you'll need. 7. Emergency communication devices beyond your smartphone. If you think your smartphone is going to save you in a winter blackout, let me drop some harsh reality on you. Your phone is only as useful as the network it connects to and the battery it runs on. When the grid collapses under the weight of snow and ice, cell towers often follow. That means no calls, no texts, no updates. Your lifeline to the outside world? Dead. And if you're thinking you'll just keep your phone charged with a battery bank, let's not forget, what's the point of a charged phone if there's no signal? This is where emergency communication devices become critical. A two-way radio isn't just a relic of your grandparents' generation. It's your lifeline when modern technology fails. These radios, particularly long-range models like those operating on GMRS frequencies, can keep you in contact with family members, neighbors, or local emergency services, even when cell networks are down. And don't cheap out on those toy walkie-talkies. They won't cut it in a real emergency. Invest in a high-powered set with weatherproofing and replaceable batteries. For those who want a broader reach, ham radios are the gold standard. Yes, they require a license to operate legally, but in an emergency, that license is the last thing anyone will care about. A ham radio can connect you to emergency frequencies, local operators, or even people across the globe. If you've got a solar panel or crank-powered battery charger, you can keep these devices running indefinitely. And let's not forget satellite communication devices like the Garmin InReach or Spot X. These allow you to send messages or SOS alerts even in areas where no cell or radio signal exists. They're expensive, but what's your life worth? In a prolonged blackout where emergency services are stretched thin and roads are impassable, these devices might be the only way to call for help. Without a way to communicate, you're isolated, completely and utterly. You won't know if the storm is getting worse, if evacuation orders are in effect, or if help is coming at all. Imagine being trapped in freezing conditions, your family looking to you for answers and having no way to provide them. That's the nightmare scenario you're facing if you don't prepare. 8. Durable emergency shelter materials, tents and space blankets. Your home is not invincible. A roof can collapse under heavy snow. A tree can crash through your living room. Frozen pipes can flood your basement. And if you think your four walls will protect you no matter what, you're living in a fantasy. When disaster strikes and your house becomes uninhabitable, you'll wish you had a backup plan. That's why durable emergency shelter materials like high-quality tents and thermal space blankets are non-negotiable survival tools for winter blackouts. This isn't about camping for fun. This is about survival in brutal, freezing conditions. Start with a four-season tent designed for extreme weather. These aren't your flimsy summer festival tents. They're reinforced, insulated, and built to withstand howling winds, heavy snow, and bone-chilling temperatures. If your house becomes unsafe, a well-made tent can become a temporary lifeboat, giving you a place to huddle with your family and conserve body heat. And don't even think about skipping on insulation. Pair that tent with thermal space blankets or an insulated ground pad to block cold from seeping in from below. Most heat loss happens through conduction when you're in direct contact with cold surfaces, so you need layers. Lots of them. Space blankets are cheap, lightweight, and can reflect up to 90% of your body heat back towards you. Drape them over the tent, line the walls, or use them as emergency covers. They're not just handy, they're life-saving. What happens if you don't have this gear? Imagine trying to sleep in a car that feels like an icebox or huddling under an uninsulated tarp while the wind tears at your body. Hypothermia doesn't care about your excuses. It will set in faster than you think, especially if you're wet or exhausted. Without proper shelter, your chances of surviving prolonged exposure to freezing temperatures plummet. Emergency shelters aren't just for catastrophic house damage. They're also essential if you need to evacuate or if the one room you're heating isn't enough for everyone. A tent can act as a microclimate within your home, helping to trap warmth in a concentrated area. It's a survival bubble, a place where body heat and a small heater can keep you alive. 9. Comprehensive fuel stockpile with safe storage. No fuel, no survival. In a winter blackout, your need for fuel doesn't just double, it multiplies. Heat, light, cooking, and even the ability to melt snow for drinking water all depend on one thing: having the right fuel. And let me be crystal clear, you won't be able to find some once the grid collapses and everyone else is scrambling. If you don't have a comprehensive fuel stockpile before the storm hits, you're already behind. Start with propane, the king of emergency fuels. Compact, easy to store, and versatile propane powers heaters, camp stoves, and even portable generators. But here's the catch. One small tank won't cut it. You'll need at least 4 or 5 20-pound tanks to get through a prolonged blackout in sub-zero conditions. Store them properly, upright, in a ventilated area away from direct sunlight, because a fuel leak in freezing weather is a disaster waiting to happen. Next, firewood. If you have a wood-burning stove or fireplace, stockpile seasoned hardwoods like oak or maple. These burn longer and hotter than softwoods, which are basically kindling in disguise. And don't think a few logs will do. Depending on how much heat you need, you could burn through a cord of wood in just a couple of weeks. Make sure your stash is dry, covered, and easily accessible, because digging through snowdrifts to get to wet logs is not just frustrating, it's futile. For those with kerosene heaters, stock up on kerosene. At least 10 gallons for short-term emergencies, and double that for prolonged outages. Keep it in approved containers and far away from living areas to avoid the risk of spills or fumes. Charcoal and fire starters are also critical for outdoor cooking or as backup fuel for wood stoves. Just remember, never use charcoal indoors unless you want carbon monoxide poisoning to be the last mistake you ever make. Finally, let's talk about alternative fuels like butane, alcohol, or bioethanol. These are lifesavers for smaller devices like portable stoves or emergency heaters. Stockpile what you can, and make sure you understand how to use each fuel type safely. Improper use of alternative fuels leads to fires, explosions, or poisoning. And in a winter blackout, that's a death sentence. Without a proper fuel stockpile, you're living on borrowed time. What happens when the power doesn't come back in a day or a week? You'll run out of fuel long before the cold runs out of ways to break you. Fuel isn't just a commodity, it's survival currency in a blackout. The more you have, the longer you last. So stock up, store it safely, and prepare to fight the cold with everything you've got. Because winter won't give you a second chance. 10. Advanced medical supplies and survival medications. Winter blackouts are breeding grounds for medical emergencies, and if you think a basic first aid kit is going to cut it, you're setting yourself up for failure. Cuts, burns, frostbite, hypothermia, dehydration, infections, and chronic conditions don't take a break just because you're in survival mode. In fact, they get worse. A well-stocked advanced medical kit and a reserve of essential medications aren't just a good idea. They're the line between life and death when emergency services are unreachable and hospitals are overwhelmed or inaccessible. Start with your standard first aid supplies, bandages, gauze, antiseptics, and painkillers. But understand that those are just the beginning. What happens when someone suffers a deep cut or a laceration? You'll need suture kits or wound closure strips to stop the bleeding and keep the injury from becoming a bacterial playground. Include hemostatic agents like QuickClot to rapidly stop severe bleeding, because in freezing conditions, blood loss can kill you even faster than hypothermia. Winter-specific injuries like frostbite or severe burns from makeshift heaters need specialized care. Stock up on burn gel, sterile dressings, and aloe vera to treat thermal injuries. For frostbite, you'll need thermal wraps, chemical heat packs, and sterile saline to rehydrate damaged tissue. And don't forget antibiotics, whether over-the-counter ointments or doctor-prescribed oral medications, because infections thrive in unhygienic, stressful conditions. Without antibiotics, even a small wound can turn into a life-threatening septic nightmare. If anyone in your household relies on prescription medications for chronic conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, or mental health disorders, you need at least a 30-day supply, preferably more. The cold reality is that pharmacies close during blackouts and supply chains grind to a halt. Without insulin, inhalers, or heart medications, you're gambling with lives. Ask your doctor for extra prescriptions now while you still can, and invest in proper storage solutions for temperature-sensitive meds. Don't overlook pain management and emergency supplies. Severe injuries or prolonged illnesses require more than ibuprofen. Add lidocaine patches, oral anesthetics, and even stronger prescription painkillers if you can legally acquire them. And for emergencies like sprains, fractures, or dislocations, pack splints, elastic bandages, and a proper sling. Your body doesn't care if it's inconvenient. Injuries happen, and the inability to stabilize them can render you immobile in life or death situations. Here's a nightmare scenario for you. Someone gets sick with a winter bug, and without proper care, it spirals into pneumonia or severe dehydration. What do you do? Without access to IV fluids, you'll need oral rehydration salts or DIY electrolyte solutions to keep them hydrated. Stockpile thermometers, fever reducers, and cold medications, because respiratory illnesses don't just make you miserable, they weaken your body, leaving you vulnerable to the cold and compounding any other medical issue. Now, let's talk tools. You need trauma shears, tweezers, scalpels, and a manual on wilderness or survival medicine. If you think Google is going to save you in a blackout, you're dead wrong. Literally. Learn how to treat wounds, handle fractures, and even perform CPR. This isn't Boy Scout stuff. It's survival 101 when no one else is coming to help. Thank you for watching.